All right, people. Here we got another one going on here. Now, I'm a preface this by saying I actually watched this one already, and this reaction video is, uh, I think, one that I would like to point towards the women to give you an example of what it means when men say that we often can't express ourselves to you, uh, and why we can't be vulnerable sometimes. And some of the guys watching this gonna know what I'm talking about. So this video is actually from the UK. They basically are talking about making a ministry for men or minister of men, and they're talking about it on the BBC News. I think this is now. Watch how this goes, and I will point it out as we see. But you should see it as I'm doing it. All right.
Cream later on, but in the Times, this headline:
Check this out.
Sunak urged to appoint Minister for Men, suggested by a Conservative MP. New role would champion issues such as reducing male suicide. Would that be something you'd be in favour of?
Well, what's interesting about that is the hostility it sometimes faces whenever it comes up. I saw a programme where there was like a feminist academic and a Lib Dem MP, and they were so hostile to this idea. And I thought, if you flipped those things, i.e. that it's the biggest cause of death for men under 50 is suicide, men are less likely to go to the doctors, you know, men are less likely to maintain friendships. If that was for women, we'd often look at, well, why is society making that happen? Whereas with men, the argument is often, why are they doing that to themselves?
So let's stop right there. That is a big deal when it comes to men. Often they'll say, oh, society has made it that way. But society is made up of people, and society is both the men and the women have made it so men get blamed for their own problems. No one cares. And this just brings me to a saying I've always say, it's all your fault and nobody cares. That's how it is for men. I'll explain it more a little later in this video, excuse me. But let's keep watching.
I'm not like totally wedded to the idea, but the hostility towards the idea, I find it instructive.
Ava?
I think that it feeds into the culture a little bit, this Minister for Men argument. In my mind, I think there should be a Minister for Mental Health, which would be all-encompassing. I mean, you've got something like 7 million children waiting for prescriptions for mental health at the moment. It's a crisis that's endemic throughout the country, not specific to men. And I think, you know, a lot of ministers kind of bandy this about to sort of, I'm sorry, but make an enemy out of women. I think, not you, and I don't think your book is.
I don't accept that. I don't think it is to make...
My man said, I don't accept that. Let's keep listening.
An enemy. If we looked at during COVID, men were literally more likely to die from COVID. And I don't really want to cast myself.
I don't know how true that is.
Or one of these guys from the manosphere, because that's not who I am. But I do find it interesting that sometimes the arguments tend to throw it back.
But who was doing all the work during COVID? You know, a lot of the time, if you looked into people's households, it was the women who were taking on the laundry, the school.
Now, how would she know that? I already know where she's going. How would she know that the women were doing all the work? I know at my house, I got to admit that I definitely had to help out with that more. There was a point where my wife worked from as a stay-at-home mom, and I worked all the time. And then when we transitioned to us both working, there was a conversation that needed to be had about me picking up more of the housework now that I'm not the sole breadwinner. And that's a conversation that can be had within all households, but she's making it seem like, okay, that's not the case. The women were doing all the work. And this is one of the things men mean when they say they can't express themselves, is that we can't tell you how we feel about something without you then turning and saying, this is how you feel about what we just said. And then the conversation becomes about you when we were just talking about ourselves. But let's keep going.
The school care, all of that.
I'm not disputing any of that. What I'm saying that there are specific issues that men face that might warrant specific attention. I mean, literally, the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. That is an arresting statistic. And if that doesn't warrant specific attention, mental health is an umbrella issue.
I have to say that is also because women are unsuccessful. That is a lot of feeds into that statistic.
But if it...
What? Now, that's the part that always tripped me up. Now, like I said, I saw this video before. So right here, I'm always like, because women are unsuccessful, I'm guessing what she means is men are killing themselves because of the responsibility of running the households. And that in turn is because women are less successful. I'm not even sure. I'm just trying to make the leap because it's not explained in the video, but we'll keep going.
It feels like, it just doesn't feel like you've got any space for this idea that men might have unique challenges that face them. And the problem is, even as I'm saying this, in my mind, it's like I've got out the violin, and I don't want to be.
Read the book,
I don't want to be.
I
don't want to be this guy, because that's part of the problem. Is because you're encouraged at one level, is men need to talk about their problems more, and then the moment you do it, you're like, all right, but not quite so often and not quite so loud. So
another point, it's like you do want us to express ourselves and be sensitive, but not really. And this is something I've said to my own wife before. It's like, you don't want me to be sensitive. What you want is me to be sensitive at specific spots that you think it's okay for me to be sensitive. But sensitivity, for the most part, for people, is not something they turn on and off. They simply are sensitive. So you're going to be sensitive about a lot of stuff. When you say something mean to them, he's going to be sensitive about it. When you say something nice to him, he's going to tear up and be like, oh my God, thank you so much. And then you're like, oh, he's a little too soft for me. So it's like this conundrum that we feel going back and forth, where how soft and how vulnerable can we actually be, you know? And that's not even just with the women, that's men too. Like, even he's like, hey, chill. You know, your skirt is showing, basically what he's saying.
like you say, the book is more light-hearted than that, but it certainly, goes around these issues.
Francis?
I think it's about this issue. I've got a brother, a son.
Watch this. It'll seem like she's with them, but
Paul Novak, one of my best mates, who's leading the TUC. When you look at masculinity, it sort of feels like boys are still brought up. You're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to talk about your feelings. You've got to put on this bravado. And I think that has to change. But I also think that we have to change the fact that women still earn 15% less than men.
But no one's...
Look at it. But you can't even talk about this issue without, he's saying, okay, men are having a problem. We should have a men's ministry or a men's minister or whatever to help us with these issues. And they're like, I don't like what you said, how that makes me feel. What about women? And it's like, wow, like this is a big example I've even seen. Like it keep going. It gets worse.
I'm saying you can't do both.
No, exactly.
We can multitask.
Exactly.
Can you multitask?
Well, not me personally, obviously, but I'm saying that. But I don't think that those are reasons to not address these problems.
No, I agree.
Francis.
But most women experience sexual harassment.
But I totally accept that. I don't understand
every day.
What does this have to do with what he's saying?
I'm talking about the specific issues that men face, and you're quoting other issues which I do not contest on any level.
Here's a proposal.
Right.
I'm seeming very chippy now, aren't I? I didn't expect it.
Why don't you launch BASH? Blokes Against Sexual Harassment.
Well, I'm totally
this is British.
Sexual harassment,
but do something to support women, stand by women who are facing that in the way that women stand by men. You stand by women.
See how it became, what about us? Stand by us. In the way that women stand by men. I think I definitely know for sure that in the Black community, at least it used to be, that the women stood by their men when they were getting attacked and all that kind of stuff. Now there's a whole gender war going on. So, I mean, nobody's looking out for anybody. But he can't even talk about this without them saying, what about us? And I say all this to say, because this is sort of the same thing we go through when we try to just tell you about how we feel about something. Then it becomes about what we said and how what we said made you feel. And the conversation gets hijacked. And that just teaches us to shut the hell up. That's all. Let's keep going.
And I think we could.
Well, I do think this discussion has already been interesting. I've mentioned the suicide stat several times, and we've ended up discussing other things which are completely valid. Certainly,
see, he acknowledges that they're valid.
I understand why those discussions are live discussions, but the idea that we can't have both those discussions, I genuinely find that odd,
Nobody
Francis.
said we couldn't.
Is this discussion being squeezed out? Is there not enough space for this as well?
Well, it slightly feels, I'd rather agree with Jeff. I'm fascinated listening to this discussion.
Fascinating.
That at the first hint of men saying maybe we need a bit of attention, it's women have been oppressed throughout the ages, which is
true.
But it must be the case that if there are specific male problems or problems that only affect men, then we should try and deal with them at the same time as dealing with the specific issues that affect women.
What would you think sexism is
doing?
Ultimately bad for men too? Sexual harassment is ultimately bad for men too. And decent men need to stand up and say so. And I think we could have better lives.
What we're talking about sexual harassment.
In my industry, I'm happy to stand and say, that in comedy there are specific problems in and around this area.
Because there is a power imbalance.
But that's what, and I've had that discussion on my podcast and elsewhere. I'm happy to say that as many times as people want me to say it. But just in this small section of the show, I thought we were going to just mention about some of the specific problems that men face. Men were more likely to die from COVID. If that had been flipped, we would have looked at why is this this is a tragedy. We'd have looked at all the underlying reasons, but it just wasn't really a discussion. And I'm just interested in why it wasn't a discussion.
Well, that'll be for the next show.
Yes, the book
Thank
is
you.
more like heart.
Well, that's the end of that. So I just I saw this on another channel with another British young lady reacting to it, so I figured I wanted to say something about it too. It is super crazy, but I felt like it was a good example of how we can't even express how we feel or talk about any men's issues without it becoming a women thing or women bashing. And I get it. There are plenty of channels where dudes cannot talk about men's issues without saying all the shitty things they say about women. You know, if they ever lead off with entitled or modern woman, you already know they're on some bullshit. So I get it. I understand. But sometimes we just want to tell you how we feel, and then we talk about that and not have it come back to you. That's all. So like I always say, man, I'm just some dude on the internet with a camera and a mic. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Find your own sources and make your own opinions. Until then, we out of here. All right, y'all. Golden Line speaks, baby.